Please don't leave. Please don't leave. There were dreams that may be shattered now I know, but it seems that we can capture yet to glow.
Un, deux.
Please don't leave. There were dreams that may be shattered now I know, but it seems
Attendez, peut-être, moi je vais peut-être aller là, comme ça c'est mieux, vous êtes de mettre l'échange. Bon, j'ai préparé 10 pages de chiffres.
This like PowerPoint and numbers.
Yeah. This by numbers.
All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Welcome to the second part of Climate Days at HEC. For those who don't know me, my name is Igor Shishlov. I'm together with Daniel Albert. I'm the co-director of the Climate and Business Certificate, a new 5-week program. This is the first edition this year. It's a specialization program for Master, MBA, and EMBA students, and it's really a flagship program on climate at HEC. And Climate Days are essentially part of the last week of that program, open to a broader audience. I studied at HEC more than 10 years ago, and since then I had a chance to come back here on campus on many occasions to participate in various sustainability-related events. And I'm really happy to see that HEC has progressed a lot on climate and on sustainability with various new courses, the new climate certificate, Climate and Earth Center, and many other activities. And this is something that gives me a lot of hope. And I think it also demonstrates that climate change topic has moved from being just one of the CSR issues to something much more important and central to the strategy of companies. And this morning will be dedicated precisely to that. We will have 2 panel discussions this morning. The first one on net zero strategies, and the second one on carbon offsetting, and both topics being, of course, very closely related. And in the afternoon today, we will continue our discussion with 2 more panels, one on the role of entrepreneurs in the climate and ecological transition, and the second one on the role of executive in demonstrating climate leadership in their companies. And now, without further ado, please welcome our first panel of the day that will be moderated by César from Carbone 4, Carbone 4. A round of applause for the panel, please. And with that, the floor is yours, César. Tu utilises la...
Thank you, Igor. Hello, everyone. Such a pleasure to be here. My name is César Dugast. I'm a manager at Carbone 4. So for those who do not know Carbone 4, we're a consultancy specialized in climate change. And this morning we'll have one first panel around the questions of net zero strategies for companies. And we have the great opportunity to have 3 great people on stage. We have Rémi Bussac from EDF, David Meneses from Omnium, and Clément Tremblay from ENGIE. And we are going to have some discussions about their net zero strategies. But before going to that panel, I will do a short introduction on the question of net zero and why it could be seen sometimes as a real opportunity for transformation, but sometimes as, unfortunately, some opportunity for greenwashing. So if I may start with maybe the question of why would it be seen sometimes as greenwashing? Well, maybe to start answering this question, we could use one document that was published some month ago by a German think tank called New Climate Institute. New Climate Institute has tried to assess the net zero strategies of 25 companies around the world to check whether these strategies were credible and transparent. And their conclusion is a bit hard, but around the 25 companies, only one has a reasonable ambition. Lots of others have either a very low integrity or a low integrity or a moderate integrity. And you can see that the highest category here, which is the high integrity, none of the 25 companies were assessed to be of high integrity. So this raises lots of questions on the net zero strategies and why some are very good and why some are not very good. To answer the question of what is a good net zero strategy, we always do something quite useful, is to remind us of what climate science says about net zero. When you look at New Climate Institute's study, to finish on that, you can see this chart here. So you have several categories on their 25 companies. You have what these 25 companies have appeared to pledge. It's around 2.7 gigatons of CO2 that, well, had to be reduced. But after having analyzed these strategies, they realized that what they really committed to was just 0.5 gigatons of CO2 of committed emissions reductions. So one might wonder, why is it so low? How do they do to get to real net zero? Well, what they add after the committed emissions reduction something that is called offsetting plans. It is the recourse of what we call carbon credits or carbon offsets to get to net zero. It counts for around 0.1 gigatons of CO2. And then they realized, New Climate Institute realized that they leave out most of the time lots of emissions, around 1.35 gigatons of CO2. These are all the emissions that the company could control through their value chain, but exclude from their net zero target. So you can see here that there is a first concern about the perimeter of net zero. And then the final category is what they call what is unclear, because it's quite ambiguous. You don't know whether they have a commitment or not. So when you look at the net zero target, you can always ask the question of what's included in the perimeter and what is excluded. What is about carbon offsets and what is about emissions reductions. So to really understand net zero, it's really good to start with a little reminder of what climate science says about net zero. Oh yeah, and sorry, one last example about net zero and carbon neutral claims. You can see that sometimes it can be a risk, a reputational risk, for companies when you do what we call an abusive claim. For example, you can see here an example of one company that had a communication around carbon neutral flights, and then you had the co-president of the Group 1 of the IPCC, Dr. Valérie Masson-Delmotte, that publicly said on Twitter that this was not a good strategy. This made some kind of buzz, so when you're a company, well, obviously you don't like that. So what does climate science say about net zero? To really understand what net zero is at the scale of the atmosphere, you really need to think about it as a giant bathtub, okay? The level of CO2 is like a level of water in the bathtub. The more CO2 you have in the atmosphere, the more global warming you get. And net zero is the moment when you can balance emissions with what we call carbon sinks, which are basically everything that you can remove from the atmosphere. So global net zero is the moment when you can close the tap of emissions and in parallel increase the capacity of your carbon sinks to remove CO2. Carbon sinks, you can find them everywhere. These are called forests, for example, or soils, agricultural soils. And so global net zero is just a condition of reaching a stabilization of the temperature, on the planet. Oh, is it working? Here? Okay. Does anyone know where is the aim? Okay. So yeah, net zero is the moment where you balance what's going in the atmosphere and what's going out of the atmosphere. And it's the only condition to manage to stabilize the level of CO2 in the atmosphere, which is to stabilize the global warming. So the aim of the climate game, if I can say, is that before 2050, we get to a balance between emissions and removals so that the bathtub, the atmospheric bathtub, does not overflow, which is remaining below 1.5 degrees or well below 2 degrees. And so the big question here, and this is what we're going to see with the panel here, is this is a big overarching goal, but what does it mean for companies? And now what we're going to see with our three panelists is what kind of strategies should companies implement to get to this global net zero? Does the net zero exist at the scale of companies? If so, how are they defined? What can a company do to accompany the global collective effort towards reaching global net zero in 2050? This is what we're going to see with our three panelists. Maybe one first answer of how companies can get to net zero is a solution that is proposed by the Science Based Targets Initiative. So the Science Based Targets Initiative, for those who don't know, is a consortium of NGOs, the WWF, the Global Compact, the World Resources Institute, that proposed a definition of net zero at the scale of companies. And this is a very, let's say, ambitious target for companies, because this means reducing drastically their emissions and in parallel increasing carbon sinks. To really understand how companies can contribute to this net zero, you can take a look at this chart coming from the IPCC, where you can see that net zero is a very, very difficult goal. To get to global net zero, you can see here that the amount of fossil emissions need to cut by maybe 80%, 90% between now and 2050. And to get to net zero, you also need, in parallel, to develop your carbon sinks. So that's what you can see here in brown and in yellow. And the net emissions is the blue dot, the blue line here that crosses the zero in 2050 or so. So at a global scale, there is no mystery that you need both decrease your emissions and increase your carbon removals. And then for a company, you can say that you can have three different levers to reach this net zero. First, as a company, you can reduce your emissions, which is what we call decarbonization, which is reducing your emissions on all of your scopes, scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. But as a company, you can also help your ecosystem decarbonize. So as a company, you can contribute to reducing the emissions of others. That can be your customers or people outside of your value chain. And thirdly, as a company, what you can do is to help the global effort of developing carbon sinks. So these three pillars here are of some help to help understand what a company can do. And I told you about the Science-Based Targets Initiative, Net Zero. Their proposition is to look at Pillar A, which are the emissions of the companies, and Pillar C, which are the removals, and to say that companies should get to net zero in 2050 by balancing Pillar A and Pillar C. So this is an example of strategy, and what we're going to see with the panel is what other strategies can be inspired from these and which can be used to really get to a global ambitious net zero. So without further ado, I think we can start now. What we propose to do is to start with some sort of little pitch of your net zero strategies for each of you, maybe 5 to 7 minutes each. And then we're going to directly open the floor for your questions. Does it sound good to you? Is it a good program? Do you already have questions? Who already has questions? Okay, wow.
Oh, already.
Please keep them and we'll see. Great. So, who would like to start? Rémi?
Sure.
Very well. Grab a mic. Okay, Rémi, you work for EDF.
Sure, I am.
Can you tell us about EDF and its net zero plan to 2050 or maybe less? I don't know.
I'll try. So thank you first, Igor, for the invitation and César for hosting this panel discussion. So I will try briefly to explain what we are doing at EDF Group regarding net zero. So I won't present EDF. You will probably are aware that it's a French national electricity company. And actually for EDF, net zero is not only a plan, as you said, or a strategy, is part of our raison d'être, of our purpose, which was adopted 2 years ago now, which is to build a net zero energy future with electricity and innovative solutions. So this commitment is embedded in our raison d'être and in our status, actually, as a company. So, of course, it makes a very strong commitment for EDF Group to get there. Having said that, as a company, we have also a very specific situation because our starting position is quite specific in the race to net zero. We are right now the largest producer of electricity, of decarbonized electricity, meaning with no direct CO2 emissions. So it's a world number one. Of course, it is mainly based on our decarbonized electricity mixed, based on nuclear. We are the biggest nuclear producer in the world, but also on renewable, and it's probably less known that EDF Group is as well the first producer of renewable energy in Europe. So, having said that, we are already, let's say, mainly decarbonized as a company, but the challenge is still very important in order to reach net zero, as it was just explained by César. We have set a plan, a so-called climate transition plan, to get to net zero, and this plan was recently adopted by our General Assembly of shareholders. So it's so-called Say on Climate. You may have heard of this. Actually, it was only a few weeks ago. And within this plan, we have a clear path to get to net zero. And the first lever, the first pillar, as César said, is, of course, to reduce our emissions. So we have, in the past, already been able to decrease our direct emission by 2 between the beginning of the 2000 and 2017, and we are committed to halve again these emissions between 2017 and 2030. To do that, there are different ways to do it. I won't go through all of them, but basically it's mostly to shift from coal and heavy fuel oil, for instance, a generation, to renewable nuclear energy. We are also working on decreasing our indirect emissions. It's part of our carbon footprint, so-called Scope 3 emissions. And we have also set ambitious targets by 2030 to decrease by 28% these indirect emissions. And last but not least, we are also, of course, working on the two other pillars which have been presented by César, namely our avoided emissions. So we are trying to decrease the emissions with our product in our clients' activities. And secondly, we are investigating how to generate negative emissions. So for instance, we have launched a demonstration project in Sizewell in UK of direct air capture, and we are also investigating how to capture or sequester CO2 on our own land, because again, it's probably not very well known, but EDF is the third largest land manager in France, and with more than 7,000 hectares of forest. So we have launched a R&D project in order to see how to increase the CO2 sequestration of this land. So I won't go further into details. A lot of information are available actually on our website, and I will be happy to answer to your questions.
Thank you very much, Rémi. Perfect timing. David, would you like to continue?
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here with you today. I'm David Meneses. I'm the Executive Vice President of Sustainability for Plastic Omnium. So maybe not all of you know who is Plastic Omnium. Plastic Omnium is a company today only focused on mobility. You may have seen Plastic Omnium in the past in the big garbage trash that you see in the streets of Paris, for example. These were made by Plastic Omnium, but today we are focused only on mobility. We do external parts, bumpers, tailgates, etc. Also tanks, fuel tanks, but also now hydrogen tanks, and I will come back to that. And we do also front-end modules, and we just acquired also activities in the lighting for the mobility. So, when you are named Plastic Omnium and you want to talk about sustainability, it's a challenge because people think, oh, it's plastic, it's bad. Well, in the automotive industry, plastic is rather good, actually, because the reason why Plastic Omnium came into the mobility is because by shifting from metal to plastic, you could build lighter parts with a better aerodynamics, better safety. Today a bumper is designed in case of a shock with a pedestrian to avoid that the pedestrian ends up under the car, but rather on top of the car. So things that when you buy a car you don't know about, but this is why plastic is existing today, and this is why when Plastic Omnium was created in 1946, the amount of plastics in a car was only 10 kilograms, and today it's 250 kilograms. So it's a huge part of a vehicle today, and it brings benefit to this car. And this is not a plastic that ends up in the ocean. You have a car that will live for 10, 20, 30 years, and then now you have regulation that take care of the vehicle at the end of its life. So sustainability is in our DNA by design, I would say. And what we have done recently is to commit, of course, to net zero by 2050. We did that a couple of years ago. And last year, we communicated on our roadmap around net zero. And the particularity of this roadmap is that it's very practical. And it addresses the three areas that César mentioned earlier in the right order. When we talk about carbon neutrality, net zero, greenwashing, I have seen companies announcing very short-term carbon neutrality and basically writing a check to compensate all their emissions. What we have announced in Plastic Omnium is that by 2025, we are going to be net zero for Scope 1 and 2, but behind this, the most important part is that we are going to reduce by 80% our emissions in our plants. So what we call scope 1 and scope 2, so the one that are emitted directly in our facilities, and the one coming from the energy we purchase to EDF, ENGIE, and others. So 80%. Out of this 80%, we were even more detailed because we want transparency. We say energy efficiency, which has been always a great focus for Plastic Omnium. We launched what we call a Top Planet program 15 years ago with best practices shared across all our 150 plants. But we say, okay, we need to go further, and we work with a partner. I can name, is Schneider Electric. And so with this partner, we are going to reduce by 12% the energy consumption of our facility. And then we will go and buy green electricity. And green electricity is not again certificates. We are going to, in our main regions, namely Europe and North America, we are going to build power purchase agreements with developers. And so adding real renewable capacity on the market for our needs. Okay? And the remaining portion, which is mainly coming from the gas we consume, and in our case, the gas is mostly used for painting. We are going to see if either we can convert gas consumption to electrical consumption and then greenify the electrical consumption, or eventually find alternative to this process. Maybe tomorrow we will not paint bumpers anymore. And then we won't need gas, and then we don't emit CO2 anymore. If we are still needing this, we will be finding compensation projects, but projects that make sense, either because we are financing projects that will physically reduce CO2 emission again, or we will be helping our value chain to reduce their CO2 emissions, so the second pillar that César was presenting before. And once we have addressed scope 1 and 2, which is only 1% of our emission, 99% of the emission that we account for is outside our plants. It's in our value chain, so either upstream with our suppliers, transporters, or upstream with our customers. On scope 3, we are going to reduce by 30% by 2030. And the difference with other players from the market is that we are also going to reduce the part related to the vehicle we equip. When I put a bumper on a car, I take CO2 emission of this car related to the weight of my product and also the aerodynamics. And I'm pretty sure my calculations are not too bad because they were done by Carbone 4. So we didn't invent this by ourselves. We went to, again, as with Schneider, we are going to experts to make sure we have the right partner, and we want to have the right credibility and transparency in all what we announce and we quantify. So 30% by 2030. And all this has been certified, of course, by the Science Based Target Initiative as being aligned with the business ambition for 1.5 degrees. The only thing I will add is that in this process, the main challenge is to embark the whole value chain. Internally, it's not an issue. We have this design objective. We know we have 3 years remaining before starting 2025. The plan is clear. We are moving forward. Now, how we embark our suppliers, our transporters, our customers, because our customers today, they are facing the dilemma between regulation, consumer demand, ensuring that they are still doing business, electrification, etc. So I mean, we are facing a lot of, I would say, sometimes contradictory requests, but we need to address that. It's a must. And so we want to help our customer by providing product with lower carbon impact, with also more recycled material inside. And on the upstream part, we want to make sure we embark our suppliers. And embarking our supplier doesn't mean sending them a letter and saying them, I want you to reduce by 50% your emission in 5 years. It's helping them. It's providing them with tools. It's providing them with KPIs, with best practices to make sure they are successful, because if they are successful, we will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Clément, last but not least, from ENGIE.
Yes. Thank you, César. So Clément, I'm the Group Corporate Climate Officer. I represent ENGIE. ENGIE is an electric and gas utility. We're really close to EDF in terms of métier and activity. We have very quickly on ENGIE, 4 main branches, which is thermal, electric production from thermal and fossil fuels, gas basically, renewables, gas infrastructures and electric infrastructures, and energy solutions to help our customers reduce their emissions. So as I was saying, we're really close to EDF. So we also have a purpose linked to net zero. We proposed our strategy to our shareholders, a say on climate during the last shareholder meeting. So quickly, so I'm going to present very quickly our objectives. I think it's very interesting to focus on the pillar A, which is how we decarbonize, because this is where most of our efforts are in. So we have a net zero objective by 2045 on all scopes. So as César was saying, we're not on only scope 1 and 2, but we are on all the scopes, including our downstream and upstream emissions, with intermediate objectives in 2030, which are SBT aligned, well below 2 degrees. So if all companies did the same as us, then there would be 66% chance that the world would be at below 2 degrees. That's the definition of well below 2 degrees. And this is focused on our energy production, as I was saying, our gas power plants, and on the gas we sell. And so 50% reduction for the gas production, electric production, and 34% reduction for our gas sales, whether it's B2C or B2B. ENGIE is 166 million tons of CO2, so very different to EDF. We are a big emitter of CO2, and when we talk about net zero, is really, really, really big for us. We are 166 million tons is about 1/3 of France in terms of emissions, very quickly. And out of this 160 million tons, 80%, 85% is our gas use. Half of it is basically for our gas power plants, and half of it is for our gas sales. There's about 5% of coal still, and the rest is about our purchasing. So about 10% is our purchasing, very simplified. And so when I manage, and so I'm going to talk really on pillar A, because we also do pillar B and pillar C, but really our energy is how to reduce 166 million tons. If we have to compensate all of this, we just go bankrupt in about 1 year. It's just way too much CO2. So it's very important for us to reduce it as quickly as possible. And how do we do it? The first one is, and we've started since 2015, is exit coal. We've already reduced by 30% our reductions in 4 years. Just to give you an idea, to be 1.5, we have to reduce by 50% our global emissions between now and 2030. We did 30% in 4 years. And so this is already massive for us. It was a very pivotal strategy orientation we did in 2015 to exit coal, and we will finish exiting coal. We did about 80% already. We'll finish by 2025 in Europe and 2027 in the rest of the world. And it's focused primarily on closing these power plants, and where we can't is about selling them or converting them when we can. This is cool. The second one is increase renewable electricity. We are a big player on renewable electricity. EDF may be #1 in all renewables. We are #1 in Europe on wind and solar, for example, but we don't have the hydro you have, so that's why. And so we're massively increasing renewables. Most of our capex today is on renewables, and we'll continue on this. And the last one is exit gas, fossil gas. And this is the core of my work. It's where we have the strongest link with our strategy. And what ENGIE did is we did a strategic choice to stay in the gas industry. We strongly believe that we cannot go full electricity in terms of energy mix in 2050, in 2040, or in 2045, whatever you think about net zero. And so gas will be and will continue to be a very important player for the energy mix, especially for storage, because as you know, renewable have intermittent issues. And the whole question now is how to exit gas fossil while maintaining our gas activities. And so to be very simple, we are going about half, well, we foresee a reduction of the demand by about half. And then the rest will be through green gas. So it's biomethane from waste, agriculture wastes. You have pyrogasification as well for biomethane, so from wood. And we have hydrogen. You may have heard it's very trendy these days. And so the whole focus is how to exit gas, pilot the reduction of demand, and increase the production of green gas. And this is repilot. And we also pilot through something called flex CO2. So in finance, they have flex CapEx. We have flex CO2, so we know exactly for all our power plants, how many hours they will be used in the next years, when we will close them. And so knowing this base, we know how much we can invest to respect our trajectory. And we follow this. For the big power plants, it's easy, so it's every 2 weeks actually. We actualize this. And then for the gas sales, we don't invest a lot in power plants on gas. There's not much to do actually. But on gas sales, it's critical for us. And because the B2C customer contracts are only 2 years, we can really pilot exactly how many customers we want to have for 2025 and 2030. And so we actualize this, and we know how many customers we will have in 2023, 2024, 2025. And so we know how many more customers we can have. And this is crucial because we do have green gas in 2030, but in 2025, there's still very little green gas. And so most of our reduction is actually a reduction of customers. And actually at ENGIE today, to respect our climate objective, we have to reduce our numbers of customers on gas sales to B2C. And so we're piloting a reduction of customers to obtain our climate objectives. And so this, I think, is really how shows the transformation we have. We're really close to the strategy, and it's something that is really taken seriously at ENGIE.
Thank you very much, Clément. Well, these are 3 fascinating net zero roadmaps, quite different as well. And now maybe it's time for the questions of the room. So what we are going to do is to take your questions. So I don't know how you would like to proceed. What's the best? Should we take a few questions first and then let them answer, or just one question and then answers like that?
I think we can do one by one.
Yeah? Okay.
Hello, thank you so much for your presentations. I have a question for Clément. Briefly, you said you wanted to reduce the sales of gas in B2C. How are you exactly expecting to, fill the void in terms of the usage of gas that's currently being done? Because if you're gonna stop sending gas to B2C customers, are they gonna go somewhere else and get more gas? At the end of the day, the impact on the planet is the same, right?
Yes, exactly. That's the problem of staying at the company level. So first in B2C, the piloting of the reduction of clients is like the last solution we had. The first solutions is helping our customers to reduce their emissions. And so we do a lot of sensibilization, I'm not sure in English, but communication at least for our customers to help them reduce. We have lots of services to renovate their houses or to improve the efficiency of the boilers, or go through electricity as well. So this is the first solution. And then, yes, we are challenged for coal and for tomorrow gas power plants. We're challenged on the fact that we have to sell some power plants. And if we think about coal, it was okay to close them because they were kind of old and they're really, really emitting. So we could close them with the countries, with the help of the countries. But gas is too crucial for the electric system. And so if we push, because we're well below 2 degrees, if we want to push to 1.5, we can only sell these gas power plants because countries will refuse us to close them. And so there's a whole question of how do you, I'm happy with ENGIE, is already big enough for me, but the interaction of ENGIE with the rest of the society is it's a very good question. And so concretely, every customers we lose because we have to, it's again our last resort, obviously, is taken by someone else.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. I think it was very interesting. I'd like to go a step backward, and I don't have a question. I don't have much more of a comment regarding the title and what you presented at the beginning. I think it's very important that we target net zero, and to reach net zero, we have to base our strategy on the 3 pillars that you presented: pillar A, reduction; pillar B, reduction out of your perimeter; and pillar C, doing sequestration. We know at that stage that at a worldwide level and at the level of a company, we cannot reach today the equilibrium between emission and sequestration. So we have also to find solution on pillar B. And pillar B is a reduction outside your perimeter. So it's mainly offsetting. So offsetting, you will help companies in least developed countries to reduce their own emission. So I think we are acting very positively regarding climate, and you have now a big ecosystem around offsetting just to validate the serious of the action. You've got auditor, you've got certifier, you've got the standard. My point is that I don't see how we can imagine that it's greenwashing when you are doing offsetting. So I didn't understand the debate regarding the claims, let's say, of Air France that you presented at first. I think we have to focus on all the solutions existing in the world: reduction, offsetting, sequestration, to gather all the possible solutions to reach the target, which is net zero. So I would prefer to see as a title, let's say, of this debate, net zero strategies, let's accelerate all together, and to focus on net zero instead of greenwashing, which may be a term that is counterproductive regarding action. So I'd like to have your reaction regarding my point. Okay, my name is Thierry Fornas, so I'm president of Altabia and formerly president of EcoAct.
So who would like to answer? Do you want an answer from me or one of the panelists? Everyone? Maybe I can start and maybe you can continue. So lots of comments. Thank you very much for your comments. So, on the title of the roundtable, I think it's important to say that some strategies are pure greenwashing. And it's important also, I think, it's really my personal opinion, that we need to fight these abusive claims because it's no good for anyone. If lots of companies start doing greenwashing, there is a real danger of having a slow climate action, whereas we're at a time where we need to accelerate very much. Second point on the claims of carbon neutrality and the example of Air France. So I am not the one who tweeted this, it's Valérie Masson-Delmotte that did. And I think the point behind her tweets was that sometimes for products and services that are not really compatible with global net zero, which is the word we want to see in 2050, then the claim of carbon neutrality can be interpreted as something quite ambiguous. And you are completely right saying that we have we have a strong ecosystem with carbon offsetting. We have certifiers, we have auditors, we have a very robust carbon market. But we shouldn't, I think, again, it's my opinion, we shouldn't mix the robustness of the market and the use that's being made by companies by purchasing these carbon offsets, which is why at Carbone 4 we are much like we love to use the term contribution, financial contribution to accelerating global climate action through the purchase of carbon offsets, rather than talking about compensation or offsetting, which are terms that we think let people think that we can just erase a carbon footprint by just making a check. So in the end, I think it's both important to say that some companies can have better action, all the while preserving the good tools that we have. And carbon offsets and the voluntary carbon market is one good tool, as long as we use it correctly. So this is my answer. Maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, so, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, offsetting is part of the solution, at least for the years to come. The only thing is that you need to address it in the proper direction. So, signing a check to remove all your emissions from one day to another is not going to solve the problem. In our case, as I said earlier, we want to reduce first the CO2 emission by 80%, and eventually, for the remaining portion, we will do compensation. But I could do also just decide that tomorrow we sign a check for 100% of our emission. Scope 1 and Scope 2 today for plastic Omnium is 500,000 tons of CO2. Scope 3 is more than 40, but 1 and 2 is less than 500,000 tons. Compensation 3-4 euros, I would pay 2 million per year. Okay? I'm going to invest instead more than 40 million euros just to gain 12% of energy. Because this is what we need to do. The best is not to emit. I think the message of Valérie Bouillon-Delmotte when she talked about Air France is to say, okay, it's great to compensate for the trip you had, but did you need this trip or not? That should be the first question you should ask yourself. Rather than thinking, oh, I don't worry, I mean, I can travel as much as I want because at the end, if I had a few euros to my ticket, I would do it in a clean way. So this is, I think, what we need to have in mind. As César said, I think it's one tool, and we probably are going to use it, but let's make sure we use it in the proper way.
César, do you mind if I add something?
Of course.
Because actually I wrote the title of the of the roundtable, so I feel like I should justify a little bit, and I agree fully with César, and you've seen the report from the New Climate Institute and Climate Carbon Market Watch that César talked about in the beginning. We indeed see that in many cases companies making these net zero claims, if you look really deeper into what's behind, you often see good examples of greenwashing. So I would say that the title is quite valid, and the question is valid. That said, regarding the question of offsetting, we actually have another panel just after this one at 11:20. So I really encourage everyone to to stay and participate in that discussion. We'll dig deeper into the question of offsetting.
So, thank you. I will be very brief. Thank you for your point. I just want to say that it's completely coherent that we've got to reduce highly at all levels, and no company now does only offsetting. I just want to remind that the company who was doing offsetting, they are not obliged to do so. So if we are all focused here in this room to tackle climate change, I think we have to gather all the solutions. And if a company is not obliged and can pay millions of euros just to allow low carbon project in least developed countries to reduce their own emission, it's very good for the climate, even if they do only that. That's finance who go in low carbon project. But even if they would do so, it would be a mismatch with their strategy. They have to gather all the solutions and to reduce on their own perimeter. I fully agree. But they are not obliged to do so. I just want to remind that. So it's a very good solution for the planet.
Thank you, Thierry. Are you staying for the second session? Excellent. So we'll get back to it. Let's park the discussion about offsetting for the moment. There's another question.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to know if you have an internal price of carbon and what is that price?
Yes, we have. It's a regular question we have from all our rating agencies. So yes, we have one, and we use them especially for our new projects and any power plants we have, just to compare the sensitivity of the financial proposition with regard to a possible increase of the internal price. I think these days we're around 45 to 50 euro the ton. Something like this. In addition, well, we have ETS obviously in Europe, but outside Europe, it's this price. But again, our real management in terms of climate is on our absolute emissions through budgets and carbon targets, and we really follow our absolute emissions, and we're not following the how to call this, like the the offer and demand, the economic offer and demand part. And we just use the carbon price to test if in 5-10 years the financial proposition of the project is still valid. This is how we deal it.
So in our case, we also have an internal carbon price, which is mainly used for our investment decisions. So basically, each time we have to face an investment decision, we will consider a carbon price, which is basically based, it's a projection based on the ETS price, so European ETS price, so that we are able to take into account the fact that the expected price of CO2 is going to rise in the coming years, and of course this will impact any carbonized activity in the future.
So yes, at Plastic Omnium we have also an internal carbon price, and it's used to challenge the investment decision, the arbitration between two different equipments, etc. But as I said earlier, our internal emissions are going to be down to zero or close to zero in 2025. So it's temporary. What we need to address is the 99% outside our internal perimeter, so the value chain emissions, of which 90% is actually on the downstream side, so the vehicle. And here, what we are doing is not to put a CO2 price, it's to say we want to go faster than the market to low carbon mobility, which means electrification, batteries, and also hydrogen. And so just to give you an order of magnitude, today in the fuel tank business, we do roughly 2 to 2.5 billion euro of business. We aim to do in hydrogen in 2030, 3 billion of business. So we are going to shift from a fossil fuel business to a low carbon business in the next few years, and faster than the market. And this is where we want to make a difference.
Thank you so much for your presentation. So my question is, I know you're here today to present your company and activities, but if you could stay a step back, not presenting the companies that you're coming from, but as environmental experts on your personal point of view, do you think within the ecosystem that you're living in now, we're doing necessary actions to ensure the climate is going to stay within 1.5 degrees in this century? Are you positive with your actions? If you're not, what are the challenges? But
thank you for the question.
It's a very, very good question. Talking about the world of mobility, so stepping out of my own company, talking about the world of mobility, we are facing a very, very difficult challenge. Because we know we need to go to zero emission vehicle as soon as we can. We know that on one side, the regulation is taking us there. And I'm going to do a 20-second regulation bashing on mobility, just to explain that today in Europe, for I don't know which reason, government have decided that the only way mobility should be tomorrow, it's electrical. So they are basically dictating the technology rather than dictating the target, which should be their job. Basically, we need to go to zero emission vehicle or close to zero emission vehicle. But honestly, we don't care if it's electrical or fed with bananas or whatsoever. I mean, we just need to be zero emission vehicle. And so we are closing technologies and actually putting companies in front of very tough changes that will affect not only the company, but the people behind. I mean, if in 2035 there is only battery vehicles, first, I'm not sure Europe will win the battle of where this car will be produced. And even if they will, it will reduce significantly the number of employment in this industry. So behind the environmental challenge, there is a very strong social and societal challenge. And honestly, I don't know how this is going to end up, but if what Brussels is asking today is happening, it will make some damage. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't go to zero emission. Again, it's just the way we are being asked to go there is a real challenge, and I don't know yet how we are going to address it.
So this is personal. I'm not talking for ENGIE. I'm pessimistic. I'm personally. I find my optimism in my action. 1.5 is extremely difficult. It's amazingly difficult, actually. It's possible at company size, but at a society level, it's just amazing the changes that will happen. Just one example, we had to, for example, sell coal power plants. So tomorrow with gas, we have companies who just cut their company in two and remove all the fossil-based activities and sell it to investors who just don't care about climate. And we had these issues for coal, and we will have these issues for gas. And we have lots of European utilities who have already cut their companies in two and started to sell the fossil-based activities, and there are lots of investors who are happy to buy them. So for me, there's two massive challenges. The first one is behaviors and behavior change. You talked about mobility. The pace of reduction, I'm thinking about Air France, the pace of reduction is so drastic that we can just stop taking planes at this point, because planes will not be available on time, green planes. Maybe in 2050, but at one point we have to make choices. I'm pushing internally in my company the question of, do we need to have electricity all day long? Can we start thinking about not having electricity on some periods of the day because the costs are too high for the energy transition? And today, obviously, people are not ready to not have electricity all day long in their homes. And the second one for me is a bit also bigger, is the economic system today. Capitalism today is not, for me, it doesn't make possible this transition at such a high pace. And there are things such as multi-capital accountability or other initiatives like this. I'm saying capitalism, there's a problem with it. I don't have the solutions behind. I'm not an economist. But I feel like continuing having these visions of continuing growing all the time is, at least on material-based activities, is just not possible. Huh? On an energy point of view, we need to reduce our activities. So yeah, no. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's clear, it has been said. We need to change not only our products, but we need also to work on our habits collectively, and we have to probably change the way economy works, probably. But still, I think the good point is that even big societies, just like ours, they are they are facing this reality, and things are moving forward. I think of course, we are not there yet, but it's quite impressive to see that even if big capitalistic companies, the CEOs, they are now in mind that perhaps we have to talk about less consumption. We have perhaps to renounce to some activities because it's not the future, it's not the way we want to go, and I think it's a good signal, even if it's we are not at the right pace, as you said, but I mean, it's in the mind of the people, at least.
Yeah, just one thing. 1.5 and 2 degrees are very two different things, and so I'm much more optimistic about 2 degrees than 1.5. Just also.
Maybe just a follow-up question on this, because I love this question. You mentioned, for example, the fact that you are going to organize the degrowth of consumption of your customers for gas. David, you also mentioned the fact that maybe in a few years you will not paint your bumpers anymore because. So this all raises the question of let's say the management of sobriety and degrowth of material fluxes in a 1.5 degree planet. And my question to you is, how would you rethink your business models in order to keep thriving, but in a world that basically degrows its energy and material fluxes?
So, for mobility, actually, it's not a dream or actually a nightmare. It's the present. I mean, mobility, individual car volumes reached their maximum already 4 years ago. So since 2018, we have been declining in numbers of cars. So if we were not already reinventing our business, we will be out of business. And so the shift has already happened from volume to value. Is how we are able to sell more value, which is not more physical fluxes. Huh? It's really value. And what we believe is that what we call today crisis, COVID crisis, semiconductor crisis, Ukraine crisis, this is the new normal. We are going to go from crisis to crisis. And so we need to have companies that are resilient to that. And for that, we need to be able to show that we deliver value, whatever the volume is. And so in the case of PO, I talked earlier about diversification. We are entering into lighting. We have entered already 7 years ago into hydrogen. And with hydrogen, we are going from only individual car to train, trucks, buses, because even if tomorrow we are asked to move less or to use shared vehicles, etc., you will still be moving, and you will still need to move products also from one place to another. So globally, when we project, and we work with your team on that, when we project in 20, 30 years, there will be mobilities, they will be different. And so this is in this new normal that we are projecting.
Well, in our sector, the electricity sector, so we expect that the end energy will fail in the coming years because of the change of behaviors and consumptions. However, we also expect that the share of electricity within the final energy mix will increase, and actually it should even double by 2050. So we are in a quite specific situation where our main product is part of the solution, the net zero solution.
Yeah, and to follow on Rémi, I'm organizing the degrowth of the fossil gas actually. 80% I think of the world primary energy consumption is based on fossil. So just going from 80% fossil fuels based to 100% renewables is massive opportunities in terms of business. We do have actually other ways. So that's the thing on energy production. We have a lot to go before thinking about any degrowth. And for energy solutions, we help our customers reducing their emissions. And in this case, sometimes we do energy management of universities, of hospitals. We do district heating and cooling in cities. And in this case, we help our customers to reduce their emissions either through efficiency and sufficiency through their change of behaviors. But yeah, in terms of productions, we still have a bit to go before. So yeah, there's no problem on this, on a capitalist.
One more question from the public, from the audience?
We have several questions. I think, sir, here, you were before or after these people in front? I'm not sure now. Let's go there, then we go here, and then Helen. And I think we've never had a panel where the word degrowth has been pronounced so many times in this school.
Oops. Thank you. So first of all, thank you for your interventions. This was quite interesting. So my question is that, so globally, yeah, we agree that degrowth is something that's essential, but at the same time, do we consider also all our climate actions as investment or as expenditures? Because the difference is that so if we take the profit, right, so or the income to be correct, it's like quantity multiplied by price. So, and especially for my generation, it's not for the first time when we see that people are ready to pay more for something that is more ecological, as something, you know, to make their impact in changing the world. So my question is whether those actions are integrated in your marketing strategies maybe, or you're creating like for green premium or something, or you consider it's like only your actions for the planet and you consider the like costs for your companies and not investments, so you don't consider some return on it?
If I understood well the question, for us it's a big cost and a big opportunity. Actually, it's a both. We had stranded assets. We announced, I think it was 50 billion euros of stranded assets 4 years ago, because at one point coal didn't mean anything, so it was zero for everything. That was a big cost. And then it's a big opportunity. We sell green electricity, and really like there's a massive accelerations, especially from companies wanting to buy green electricity. And for us, there's absolutely massive opportunities for us. And I'm thinking, for example, green gas is still very expensive. But we have companies, CMA, CGM, so the biggest transport boats, freight, shipping boats. How do you call this? Ship transports. We have a partnership with them, and they really buy green gas much higher than fossil gas, just to start the transition. And so for us as energy providers, being able to provide green energy for companies is, we have lots of opportunities, and companies are actually ready to buy more. So green electricity is easy. It's as expensive as normal electricity, kind of. Green gas is still much more expensive, but companies are ready to pay, actually. So, yeah.
I think that to succeed the energy transition, you need to build a story that is appealing to everyone, especially internally in your organization. And so if you are only talking about restriction, cost, etc., you're not going anywhere. For us, we explain it as a business opportunity. Even if behind, of course, we want to do good for the planet. But at the same time, we say that if we do good, and if we do it quick, we'll take a competitive advantage. Because when customers are looking for partners to address their own carbon footprint, they will know where to come. And so it's no surprise that today we are supplying most of the pure electricity car players, Tesla, Lucid Air, Polestar, etc., because they know that we are heading in the same direction that they want to go, which is low carbon mobility. And so you need to really build this in your organization. And another thing also that I think is very important is to listen internally to people who want to help on this. And so on top of what you have at strategic corporate level, you need to build a network of people who are willing to act in your organization. We created just 2 months ago a network of sustainability ambassadors. In just 1 month, we had 200 candidates for that. People who want to be part of the story, who wants to be the relay locally to the actions, who want to raise also best practices from their facility, etc. And this is really important if you want a company to be successful in the energy transition.
Yeah, very true. I will just add that, well, you need your executive committee to be really convinced about this. I think it is a key for any company to be able to go into this direction. You have to have your CEO, your executive committee to be aware, to be trained, and to really want to go into this direction. It's not easy because obviously there are opportunities and there are also some threats and some business that you may not go for because of climate. So as in any private or company, the first thing is to have your CEO and your executive committee to believe that it's really an imperative to go into this direction. And as you said, we have now also tried to diffuse this spirit within all the companies. So we have the same kind of training program and so on. So for instance, at EDF Group, we have decided that every and each of our employees will do the Fresque du Climat that you may have heard of. So we are talking of 160,000 people. So we are already at 30 or 40,000 people who have already done within EDF Group the Fresque du Climat. So it's many hours of work which have been dedicated to this, but it's also a signal to say that, okay, it is something that we have to take seriously. You have to take the time within your team to discuss these issues because it is a will of our company at the highest level.
All right, finally your turn.
Thank you so much. Very good presentation as well as the interactions. Much better. I mean, it's really good. And thanks for the presentation of EDF, Plastic Omnium, as well as ENGIE. It's at least you have very clear vision and roadmap as well as action plan. I don't know how it's going to be you achieve because this is the most difficult task to be done. But I believe you do your best. So now, actually, my question is for César. In your introduction session, you talk about 1.35 gigatons of emissions the companies could avoid, but in real they are not do. But I would like to know why. Why, in the sense they are not interested, it's volunteer, or they don't have the efficient team to manage, or they fail to assess the value chain properly. I'd like to know why this 1.35 gigatons the company didn't avoid. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. So let me try to find the slide. But actually, the slide was about the New Climate Institute report, right? And you had the waterfall saying that they need to reduce that much, but actually they only commit to reducing a small amount, right? Well, the question here is not whether they can or cannot. It's whether on the scope of what they promise to do. So the reason why, I'll try to find it, just one moment. So the reason why they do not do the 2.7 gigatons of CO2 is that they really committed to reducing a small amount of it. But it's not because they cannot do it, it's just because they chose to include just a partial scope in their total reduction scope. And this is what the New Climate Institute report showed on the 25 companies. They showed that most of the time, on at least the 25 companies that were scrutinized, lots of them do not commit on an emissions reduction that is on the full scope. And it's just that. Lots of emissions of the carbon footprint of companies are either left out or, let's say, it's not clear, okay? So I really suggest you to go see that report and read it. It's really easy, and it was really something when it was released in February, I think 2022. It was a very first step towards more scrutiny on companies' net zero strategies. Yeah.
Site address or something is there for visiting this report or get this report?
You can check the New Climate Institute website. It's fully open source.
I think if you just Google New Climate Institute, what was it, Net Zero Tracker or something? Monitor,
no,
Net Zero Monitor.
Yeah, Climate Responsibility Monitor.
Climate Responsibility Monitor.
So you can, yeah, Corporate Climate Responsibility Monitor 2022. I'm sorry, I'm really bad at this, obviously. Okay, I hope you had the time to look at the title.
All right, we have another question here from an expert on scope 1 to 3 emissions, no?
Hello, good morning. Thank you again for this very, very interesting testimonies and for being here today. I've heard the pessimistic sound, some of you. I'm a deep believer that every one of us has to take his own, little step, and in the end we'll achieve the best we can. My question goes, I'm an accounting professor here. I'm not going to talk about GEG, actually. My question is, I know this is Climate Days, a little beyond that. Some of you mentioned multi-capital also. My question is about environment, more generally speaking. How do you take that into account? How do you balance the other items or dimensions of the environment, like biodiversity and land usage? One of you mentioned land usage, so maybe EDF can answer also specifically that question with carbon and with GEG.
I may try, at least. Well, the first thing actually is that we have tried to have this comprehensive view of our impact as EDF Group, and actually very recently, last week, we have decided for this reason to change our name as a sustainability division. We are now the impact division. So what does it mean? It's not only a change of name, it's also that we want to be able to have this overview of what are our good and negative impacts as a company. And we have done what they called impact score assessment, which is actually available on the website. And this attempt to be able to readdress all the issues, not only, of course, climate, and not only environment, but also social and other aspects of the corporate responsibility, let's say. So there is no, of course, final framework to do such a work, but there is some already available nowadays, and EDF is actually one of the first companies to have carried out this assessment, which is now publicly available on site.
So yeah, my vision is really climate because I'm the climate officer. I have another environmental officer who will be happy to talk about all these. But the integration of the other environmental parameters is really it changes depending on the topics. We really pilot water consumption because our power plants use water. We pilot air pollution. And then you have nature. And on those three different, the maturity is very different. Air pollution is extremely standardized, lots of regulations on this. There's no need for us to have voluntary objective on this because it's really, really framed. For water, we have water consumption reductions, especially for our power plants. And the big question is nature. I think that was more of your question. And on nature, climate there's so much maturity on climate. We know how much emissions there is worldwide. We know what's the worldwide reduction of emissions we have to have. We can say for each company how much they are part of this reduction. Then you can put some budgets on this, and you have this amazing thing which is CO2 equivalent, where you can put everything under one unit, and poof, you can make a strategy. Nature is so much more complex. I know there's critics saying that putting everything under KPIs is not the best thing, but at least on nature, for now, our own only objectives are kind of mean objectives. So we do ecologic plans, we do biodiversity plans, but we really have difficulties to have this initial where we are at now and where we want to be tomorrow. It's coming up. We have SBTN coming, science-based targets on nature. You have EFRAG, which is also doing a lot of work on this. But it's clearly the next climate, nature. And and then, I'll be happy to talk about JG protocol as well, because even if climate is really, really mature, there's so much more still improvements going on JG protocol. So you were talking about land use, the suppliers as well, better understand the emissions from our suppliers. And on land use specifically, which is linked with nature, same actually, we have lots of hydro in Brazil. And so we have lots of land use as well in Brazil, and we're only starting to look into this and see what's our potential for compensation, but also biodiversity. And this is where you enter the big field of nature-based solutions. So yeah, it's ongoing.
Igor, do we have time for one last question?
Can I
answer? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay, César. So at PO we have a limited footprint, and definitely by design the mobility, the CO2 has been the priority. But what we are intending to do now for every new product that we developed is to do a life cycle assessment to make sure that, okay, we are addressing CO2, but we want to ensure that we are not worsening something else. And so I will give you one example. When we talk about recycled plastic, you have various types of recycling: mechanical recycling, chemical recycling. Well, depending on the type of recycling you may use, you may actually have the reverse effect of the one you were expecting. You may be emitting more CO2 by doing chemical recycling than by just using virgin plastics. And so this is what we are working on now to ensure that every new product comes with a positive impact compared to the previous solution.
Thank you very much. We have time for either one last question or one last statement. So what do you prefer? I think the question, there are so many
We've got 3 questions, but I encourage you to also continue the discussion over the coffee break. I think the sir here was the first, if I'm not mistaken, so it's yours.
Thank you very much. Julien Monturini from Beyond Builders, helping organizations to measure their impact, by the way. So very inspiring. Thank you for the conference today. One question is on, one of the big problems you were mentioning is on scope 3. Not only, but it's a big problem. And that's where companies are mainly, as César was saying, making greenwashing. How do you convey and gather all the companies' functions in trying to change the value chain? So innovation and impact, at some point, we believe at least, has to be considered together. And how much is it done when you say you do an LCA for a new product, so it's innovation, new product? How do you convey innovation, R&D, or whatever, in order to also measure scope 1, 2, and 3 in the future? Or, I mean, at some point you have to count on CO2, on existing products, fair enough, but on new product, it's probably where you have much lever.
I can be very quick because I think I'm not the most interesting on this question. So first, my first reaction on your question is, first is making sure that our managerial bosses accept having objectives on our scope 3. So accept that emissions from the products we sell goes in our carbon footprint, and we have objectives on these. And this was a big question in 2018 for us upon building our objectives on climate. And so that was a very big first step. The second part is, for me, 99 was 100% of our emissions from the use of our sold products is gas, fossil gas. And so it makes it very simple for me. So I only need to reduce the fossil gas sales through biomethane, hydrogen. And so there's innovation to make on the economic point of view. new business models, for example, for our customers to help them, PPAs, 24/7 supply, so that you match the demand and the offer at a local level, for example. But technology-wise, there's not much innovation to make. It's quite simple. It's one product, and so yeah, I think Plastic Omnium have.
Well, as I said just before, in the case of Plastic Omnium, all new developments now are going to go through life cycle assessment. So they will come with a positive impact. And I brought actually to work on Scope 3 in my team. I brought one of the head of innovation, because really I wanted to be sure that these two teams are going to work together. All new development needs to integrate sustainability as part of their process. Now, on the upstream side, on the purchasing side, this honestly was the place where I thought it was going to be the most difficult, because in the world of automotive, we are fighting for teeny margins. And so initially, I came in PO only 1.5 years ago. I said, okay, when I'm going to go and see the guy at purchasing and say, yes, now you need to buy green products, are you sure? Because it's going to cost more. No, I'm sure. Actually, we have found ways to work with some suppliers. Of course, they are not moving all at the same pace, but we have found ways, first for purchasing people to be motivated because they believe they do good. And so it's actually a motivation that came in a job which is not so easy, procurement in our world. And they found suppliers who are willing to go in the same way. And so together, actually, we are able to find product solutions that are greener and not always more expensive. And if they are, well, then we talk with our salespeople and say, okay, this is now what you're going to need to explain to your customers. And we know that even if today sometimes we feel like we are a bit alone or ahead of time, at some point it will pay off. And so the whole organization now is convinced about that and is moving in this direction. So something that 2 years ago I would say it's not going to work, today it's working because everybody realized that this is the direction the world is moving.
All right. Well, I think it's over for the first panel. Thank you so much to all three. A round of applause.